Hi guys, welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel, and today I'm going to be doing my July wrap-up. Hopefully I'll actually get it up on time. In July I read 16 books, and I don't really know, I don't have any averages, but it was like a good and a bad kind of situation. I read some favorites, I read some disappointments, but let's just jump right into it. The first book I read in July was King of Fools by Amanda Foody, which is the second book in the Ace of Shades Shadow Game series. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. I unfortunately did not enjoy it as much as I did the first book. I thought that it just wasn't as good to me. I talked about a lot more what really disappointed me in my mid-year book freakout tag, which I will link down below, up in the cards, whatever. But I talked about just like why I didn't particularly like it as much, and it was just a little bit of a disappointment. I am sad to say I didn't really care much about what the characters were doing except for Jack. I only really cared about Jack throughout the entire thing. I thought N and Levi were being really dumb, and not great. But the second book I read in July was Trouble is a Friend of Mine by Stephanie Tromley, which I ended up giving 4 stars. This is another one I talked about in my mid-year book freakout tag. It was my biggest surprise. I loved it so much. My librarian actually recommended it to me a few years ago, or no, just a little while. I don't know. My librarian recommended it to me and I finally read it and I really, really enjoyed it. It felt like a almost Scooby-Doo style mystery where it was kind of outrageous, but it was so good, and I highly recommend it. It follows this girl named Zoe as she moves to a new school and befriends this guy named Digby, who is like an up-and-coming detective, and he just finds the craziest mysteries to solve, and it's just a super cute book. It kind of has a unlikely gang in it as well, and I just highly recommend it. The third book I read in July was Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell, which I gave 3 stars. I read this book back when I was like actually writing fanfiction and very active in fandom communities, and I really, really enjoyed it. But when I reread it again, I found that I didn't like it as much. To me, Kath was just kind of immature throughout this entire story, and I didn't really like how she acted. And as much as people, or I feel like other booktubers really related to it in their college experience, I, however, don't think, even though I'm like going into college instead of reading after college, I don't think I'm going to relate to her in college. Also, I haven't read Harry Potter, so I didn't really relate to the nostalgia factor of that, but it's whatever. I enjoyed it enough. It was really easy to fly through.
This is an example of how overexposed this video gets very quickly. I'm super sorry. I apparently do not know how to work the lighting on my phone, so this is what happened when I thought I was underexposed. I just got overexposed, so I apologize.
The next book I read in July was To Best the Boys by Mary Weber, which I gave 2.5 stars. It was just very slow paced in the beginning. It took so long for the actual plot of the story to actually like start happening, and then it was very lackluster in my opinion, the actual plot of like being in this labyrinth and having to get out and like posing as a boy. It wasn't very enjoyable for me. It was also very forgettable. I don't remember a whole lot of what I read. The romance was very sudden, as much as it was like, you know, it's kind of built up, but you met the character and you're like, oh yeah, that's the romance, and that was just about it. And the only character I really liked was Delaney, so there's that. It just wasn't, it was a little lackluster in my opinion. Then I read Princess Ever After by Katie O'Neill, which I gave 3 stars. This was just like a super quick graphic novel read. Like, it was less than 50 pages, or maybe it was 50 pages, like 60. It was less than 100 pages, graphic novel, super quick to fly through. I really enjoyed it. It was really cute. I think it's a standalone one, but I kind of read it for the biannual bibliothon. It was a challenge for that, and I read it and I liked it, and it was just too short for me to give it really anything other than 3 stars. So it got 3 stars, but I did really enjoy it when I read it. Then I read Goldie Vance Volume 1 by Hope Larson, which I gave 4 stars. Goldie Vance is a graphic novel that I think takes place in the 50s, following a biracial main character who strives to be a detective, and she just has a bunch of friends, some cute like dynamics between her friends. She has a female love interest, And again, like with the Scooby-Doo style whodunit mysteries, it's just really cute, and I really loved it, and I really recommend it. I actually read the second volume later in the month, which I will talk about then, but I think of the two, I preferred the plot of the first volume, but I preferred like everything else volume 2. But I really enjoyed both of them, and I highly recommend this graphic novel series if that sounds like something that you might be interested in. The next book I read in July was Aurora Rising by Amy Kaufman and J. Kristoff, which I gave 3 stars. There were so many mixed reviews on this, which made me a little hesitant to go in just because I didn't know if I would love it or if I would hate it, and I'm kind of somewhere in between. I really liked the characters and the story. I thought it was engaging while I was reading, but whenever I wasn't reading it, I kind of forgot about what was happening and I didn't care, and it was kind of a little bit of a struggle to get back into it once I had not been reading it for a little while. And by a little while I mean like a few hours. If I didn't listen to it for a few hours, I kind of found myself starting to forget what was happening and have to just like really try and remember what was going on. Zelia's earring game was on point, and that was something probably like honestly my favorite part of it. Just I didn't like how the character Kat was treated throughout the novel. She was just kind of put in this role that she didn't really fit, but they kind of made her fit into the like bitchy, I have a crush on the main guy, but he likes someone else, so I'm gonna be pissy to her. And then it's kind of revealed that like Aurora and the main character don't really like each other, but she's still a bitch to him, so what the fuck? Like I've mentioned previously, that's one of my least favorite tropes, or like that least favorite character arc, and I liked Kat so much as a character that I hated to see her put into that just because she didn't deserve it. But you know, whatever, cool, fine. And then I read Every Heart a Doorway by Shauna Maguire, which I unfortunately gave 2 stars. It wasn't really for me. It seemed like it was going a lot too slow when I was reading it. The mystery seemed kind of predictable after a little while, and it was just kind of lacking. Honestly, the story didn't seem wholly developed in the first book, and I really didn't like the ending, and that's just kind of why I didn't really rate it higher. I didn't really like it that much, so take that as you will. I still think that some people could really enjoy this story, but I unfortunately was not one of those people. And then I read Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. This was actually a reread for me. I've read it I think 3 times in the past. This is my 4th time reading it, yeah. But I listened to the audiobook on Hoopla because it was offered, and I just listened to it in a day while I was setting up for my county fair, and it was just a super fun experience to experience the story again. I love it so much, and I just hold it near and dear to my heart. And then I ended up watching the movie later in July just because I wanted to kind of compare again. I still don't really like the movie as a representation of this novel, but the movie is good on its own. If you somehow did not know what Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda is about, it's about this boy Simon who is a closeted gay, and he has been having an email relationship with this other boy under the pseudonym of Blue. I don't know if pseudonym is the correct name for that, but like I used it, so we're just gonna move on. But as the email relationship progresses, he kind of gets blackmailed into helping this other boy, Martin Addison, get his best friend Abby Suso like to go out on a date with him, and Martin is actually blackmailing him because he found his emails, and it's such a good book. If you somehow have not read this yet, I highly recommend it. I love it just so much. And then in tandem to that, right after, I read Leah on the Offbeat by Becky Albertalli, which I unfortunately dropped to 4 stars. This was a highly anticipated release for me last year just because when I read Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda, Leah was one of my absolute favorite characters, and I think she holds up in Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda, but I don't think she holds up as much in Leah on the Offbeat. The more that I think about it, the more I think that there was kind of a personality switch between these 2 books. This seemed a little off. It doesn't really seem like her throughout the story, and I just couldn't really stand by some of the things that she did the second time around. She seemed kind of over the top with some of the things. that she did, and while I do still relate to some of the things, like with her whole like getting mad at people right before and not wanting to go to prom and like just a bunch of stuff, but then I also thought she did some not so great stuff and was over the top in some, so it just, unfortunately I had to drop it down, but I did really enjoy my reread of it, and I do still value Leah as a character. And now is the time in the month where I've read Goldie Vance Volume 2 by Hope Larson, which I gave 4 stars. I think I already kind of talked about this enough, but I read it. I really enjoyed it, and I hope to continue on very soon. And then I read We Are the Ants by Sean David Hutcherson. I forgot to mention Leah on the Offbeat, Goldie Vance, and this one I read for the Reading Rush, which I did a blog for, which I will link down below or up in the cards. Whichever. I'm not really sure. Depends on if I have internet, honestly. But We Are the Ants by Sean David Hutcherson, which I gave 5 stars. This follows a boy who was abducted by aliens and was given the chance to save the impending end of the world by pressing a button, and a while later, I think it's a year later, he still hasn't taken that opportunity just because he's dealing with so many things in his life he doesn't know if the world is worth saving. About a year ago, his boyfriend committed suicide. His mother has been getting through life by chain smoking. His brother, that he doesn't particularly like, got a girl pregnant and is dropping out of college, and his grandmother has Alzheimer's. Basically, it just follows him as he kind of rediscovers like that there's a meaning to life and that life can be worth living, and it is just so profound and so good, and I highly recommend it, and I loved it so much. I loved the dynamics between the characters and learning about his past as well as his present, and just kind of where he is coming from in this kind of like, I don't know if the world is worth saving. I definitely think that this was kind of a book more for freshman year McKenna, as opposed to like, I just graduated McKenna, because I feel like at a darker time this would have been a lot more profound to me, but I still really enjoyed it and really recommend it to anyone who thinks they might like this book. The next book I read was A Quick and Easy Guide to Queer and Trans Identities by Maddie G and J.R. Zuckerberg, and I gave that 4 stars. The title really says it all. It was a little graphic novel about like queer and trans identities and kind of a little bit of a deep dive into it. It was a graphic novel. I might have mentioned that I don't really know. I can't remember what I said like 3 seconds ago, but it was a graphic novel, and basically what it was are these like group of snails talking about queer and trans identities, and it was really cute. I don't really know how to recommend this. I don't really know how to describe this. It was a like non-fiction book about it, but I really enjoyed it, and I really recommend it if you want to learn more. And then we get to the granddaddy of disappointment, and that is The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid. Before I get into this, I want to say that I fully understand that I'm the odd one out in this club. Everyone absolutely loves The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo and just lives for Evelyn Hugo and everything and embodies it and whatever, but I didn't really enjoy it that much. I honestly don't know if it's like equal to say I didn't really enjoy it as much as I just, with what the hype built it up to be, I didn't think it was nearly as profound, and maybe that's like unintelligence, let me know down in the comments below, but I really don't think it is. I just think that it is my personal preference on what I like, and this was not it for me. But I have some thoughts on like why I didn't really like it, and here they are. Did I mention I gave this 3 stars? I gave 3 stars. 1. Celia and Evelyn's relationship had no sense of mystery. From the beginning, I knew that they were going to get together, and I knew that they were ultimately going to end up together. It wasn't really a question. I wasn't questioning it at any point when they weren't together. I knew what was going to happen. And honestly, I didn't really think they had that great or healthy of a relationship. I thought it was kind of described to be the same as most of the other relationships that Evelyn took up with her husbands, which was kind of off-putting considering they put that relationship on a pedestal, and yet it was described very similarly. I think at one point it blatantly said, Evelyn said, one thing that Celia had in common with the rest of the straight men in America was that she just wanted to get her hands on my breasts. And like, I don't know, fam. 2 was the foreshadowing that was used. Reid uses this specific form of foreshadowing where she has Evelyn say something like, oh, I fucked up, or like, you're not gonna like me after this, and it just kind of took away from it. I understand a little bit, but the fact that I noticed this form of it multiple times throughout the story kind of bugged me, and it was just kind of like, okay, something's gonna happen, why don't you get on with the story and get to what happens, as opposed to telling me that she's gonna fuck up or that something gonna happen. 3 is that all of the characters are unlikable. And I know that that's supposed to be some like profound why everyone likes it because all the characters are unlikable but ultimately so likable, but I didn't find the characters that likable. They all fucked up in really bad ways that are almost unforgivable and did it multiple times, and then you're kind of expected to forgive them. I know Evelyn's whole shtick with this book is that, no, I don't want people to forgive me, I just want to put my point of the story out, but like, she obviously wants forgiveness from people, and that's why she's doing this, but it's really fucked up what she did and what she has done throughout her life, and it just rubs me the wrong way. I don't really think it's commendable in any way, shape, or form. I understand that it's supposed to be a whole like feminist thing that she had to do this to climb to the top in Hollywood or whatever it's supposed to be, but it's honestly such unforgivable things that I really wouldn't forgive anyone if they did, especially not her, just because she's kind of a bitch throughout this and I really don't like her. And the 4th thing that I didn't really like is Monique. I really just didn't care for her story at all, and I thought it drug the story even more than it already was. I didn't care about her divorce. I really just didn't care for her at all. I didn't see, outside of kind of giving Evelyn a more forgivable light, I think that was the only reason she was really kind of brought in, so that you could see that this character did or didn't forgive Evelyn, whatever you want to say Monique did at the end of this book, and that Evelyn was kind of like steering her in the right direction, giving her this big opportunity, what the fuck ever. I just think that Monique was kind of a ploy in this book to make you feel a certain way about Evelyn, kind of subliminally, and I did not like that, like at all. And the bonus thing that I didn't really like is, because I read it physically, I did catch a lot more of the writing style, and I didn't like the writing style in this book. I think, at least at the beginning, when I was really paying a whole lot of attention to it, it was very basic. It was kind of an, I did this, and then this, and then I did this, and who said this, and they said this. And it just, for, like, such a profound writing style that she's supposed to have, it was kind of underwhelming, and it just, you know, whatever. And then they have the chapters that just jump between Evelyn and Monique's point of view without any, like, differentiating or warning, which I also didn't enjoy. I think I really didn't enjoy it when it went from Evelyn's point of view and then skipped to Monique's point of view. I didn't think it was particularly hard to catch who was talking, just because, you know, they would mention Evelyn, or it'd be an even bigger dumb bitch when it switched to Monique's point of view, but I'd still think that there should have been some differentiation. But I think the, like, fake deeps that read this book like to be so profound that they're like, oh yeah, I get it, the difference, and it's like sophistication. But, you know, I enjoyed it enough. I thought that it was a, like, good, I will read this, and I enjoyed the story kind of to a point. But I just think that with everything that it was kind of built up to be, it was really disappointing, and I tried to base it off of what I read it, not what I thought about it going in, but I just don't think Taylor Jenkins Reid is for me, and I think that's okay. And then I read The Chaos is Standing Still by Jessica Brody, which I gave 3 stars. I DNF'd this book like twice before I finally went and finished it, because, like, I almost can't stand to not finish a book. So that's why I finished it, and here's the thing. I read this book because in the description it said that there was going to be an Illuminati conspiracy, and that was a very, 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 very minuscule part of this book. And I just think that that shouldn't have been in the description because it wasn't really a part of the story. But I understand why it is, because how is she going to get reads almost anyway else? It's about this girl whose best friend died a year ago and she's kind of dealing with it. And, like, I don't want to say that she's dealing with grief incorrectly, but I personally didn't like how she was dealing with it or how she was portrayed to be dealing with it. I get it. I get to each their own, whatever you want to say. It just, I didn't like some of the actions that she took throughout this book. I also didn't like how the relationship between her and her best friend Lottie was described in flashbacks and in otherwise, where it was very party girl and a tag along, and how the main character seemed to not really have much of a personality outside of her best friend. I've seen those relationships before in literature and honestly in real life, and they always kind of make me feel bad for the one that doesn't really have a personality outside of it. And she seemed kind of pathetic, honestly, and I didn't really like that, but I did like the setting of it. I think that if we took out kind of the grief aspect, I would have really enjoyed it a lot more. And I get it, it's a grief book, people deal with this stuff. It was just not my personal cup of tea, and I think that it would have been better had we toned it down or anything like that, but it also wouldn't have been the same book. So take that for what you will. It's just my personal opinion. Whatever. And the final book I read this month was Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me by Mariko Tamaki and Rosemary Valerio O'Connell. I'm sorry, I had to read it off here, and I gave that 5 stars. This is a graphic novel about a girl who keeps getting broken up with by her girlfriend, Laura Dean. She is trying to find a way to combat this, and someone tells her what needs to happen is that you need to break up with her, and it kind of jumpstarts this whole story of what is happening in the main character's life. I can't remember her name for some reason, but what is happening in her life and how Laura Dean is affecting all the aspects in her life, not just the relationship aspect. I really loved the art style of this graphic novel, just the pinks and everything. I will try and insert a photo of what the art style looks like, just because I don't have it with me, because I think it's an amazing art style. And I really loved this story. I do think that the main character should have ended up with someone different than she actually did at the end, but that's something else entirely. But I did really enjoy the commentary on kind of how romantic relationships affect friendships, because I do think that that is something that, while is kind of explored, it isn't explored in the specific sense that it is in this book a lot in YA. A lot of the times it's kind of given as they're in a relationship now and they just deal with their friends less, and then their friends are also in relationships, so their friends don't really care. But in this case, the friends are kind of hurt when she doesn't spend as much time with them, because she is hanging out with Laura Dean, who is continuously breaking her heart. And I just really enjoyed it. It was kind of a melancholy book, but it still was just so good, and I really, really enjoyed it, and I highly recommend it.
I also want to give a trigger warning for abortion. There is nothing art style put in, but it is a situation that they have to deal with. It is not explicitly said, I don't think. I can't remember exactly, but it is something that is dealt with within the story.
So those were all the books that I read in July. Let me know down in the comments below what books you read in July, if you read any of these books in July, if you have read any of these books whatsoever, your opinions on them, what have you. And as always, make sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you sometime for a new one. Bye!